Our next speaker is Ryan Anderson, who researches and writes about marriage and religious liberty here at the Heritage Foundation. Anderson also focuses on justice and moral principles in economic thought, healthcare, education, and has expertise in bioethics and natural law theory. He has co-authored a book, What is Marriage? Man and Woman, a Defense. So please welcome Ryan Anderson. All the speakers have been so lined up, so. Ah, are you Ryan?
I am.
Your moment is here. You're on.
Okay. Sorry, I'm a little late.
That's okay.
How long do I have?
You have 15 minutes of talk, followed by 15 minutes of Q&A.
Perfect. That's what I prepared for. Sorry I'm running a little late. We're having a meeting that went a little over. Okay, so I'm going to talk about marriage, in particular in terms of what just happened with the Supreme Court. And so I'll do 5 minutes each on what marriage is, why marriage matters, consequences of redefining marriage, and then I'll close with where we go, given what the court has said. What we've been arguing is that marriage exists as a policy matter to unite a man and a woman as husband and wife, to be mother and father to any children that their union produces. It's based on the fact that men and women are distinct and complementary. It's based on the fact that reproduction requires a man and a woman. It's based on the reality that children deserve a mother and a father. When a baby is born, a mother will always be close by. That's a fact of biology. The question is, will a father be close by? And if so, for how long? That's a question of culture. And law will either shape culture in a positive direction or a negative direction. Part of this reality of marriage is there's no such thing as parenting in the abstract. There's mothering and there's fathering. Men and women bring different and distinct gifts to the parenting enterprise. Children do best with both a mother and a father. And you can ask yourself all sorts of hypothetical questions. If a parent is in the living room wrestling with their son, teaching him to be masculine without being violent, to be aggressive without pulling hair or biting or gouging out eyes, which parent is most likely engaged in this behavior? And most of you are saying that's the father. And if there's someone who, when you scrape your knee, is most likely to kind of give you a kiss and put a Band-Aid on, it's most likely the mother. These are stereotypes, but they reveal something true about the human condition, that men and women are different and that they interact with children in distinct ways. So that's what we were arguing as far as, kind of what marriage is. Why does this matter as far as policy goes? We argue that government's in the marriage business not because it cares about the love lives of consenting adults. If marriage was just about the romantic feelings of consenting adults, we could get government out of the marriage business. The reason that government's in the bedroom is because the union of a man and a woman can produce children. Children need about 18 years on average of intense care to turn out to be law-abiding, productive members of society. What's the least restrictive, least intrusive way in which government can make sure that these highly needy newborns turn into law-abiding, productive citizens? We can either have the state raise children themselves. This was kind of Plato's idea in the Republic. It's a thought experiment. Oh, we can just have the guardians raise all the kids. Or we can encourage men and women to commit to each other as husbands and wives to be mother and father. So this is actually a limiting principle in government. Government's in the marriage business to actually limit what it does itself. Marriage is it's not just a personal relationship, but it's a relationship that benefits the common good in a way that no other relationship does. We argue that marriage is society's least restrictive, least coercive way of ensuring this. And so here is when I normally cite President Obama. Let me see if I actually have that quote in my folder handy. Here we go. This is President Obama speaking back in 2008 in a speech he gave on fatherhood. He wrote, "We know the statistics that children who grow up without a father are 5 times more likely to live in poverty and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of schools, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. They're more likely to have behavioral problems or run away from home or become teenage parents themselves, and the foundations of our community are weaker because of it." We now have about 2 generations of social science evidence on the importance for children of being raised by their married biological mother and father. And the statistics that Obama cites, 5 times more likely to live in poverty, commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, 20 times more likely to end up in prison, are just the beginning of what the negative outcomes are in this case, growing up without a father. And so there's a reason why the state tries to promote marriage. What we saw with the breakdown of the marriage culture during the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, this is when child poverty increased. This is when the welfare state increased. It's when the prison population increased. It's when social mobility decreased. So everything that you can care about if you're a limited government conservative and you care about social justice, if you care about both liberty and you care about poverty, is better served by getting marriage right, by having a healthy marriage culture. Because when this doesn't happen, a liberal proposes a big government solution to pick up the pieces. They'll suggest, you look at the Life of Julia video. There's no husband, there's no father, but what you have is you have the government trying to fulfill the role of the father or the boyfriend or the husband. Which leads into the third part of this talk. What are the consequences of redefining marriage? And I'll say the first thing right up at the front is that you can't redefine marriage to say that fathers are optional while insisting that fathers are essential. The law functions as a teacher. And if you redefine marriage to make it a genderless institution, you're saying that two moms or two dads is the same thing as a mom and a dad. So the first thing of the question here is going to be, what's the pedagogical, the teaching function of law, and what would be the effect of this law? What we saw with no-fault divorce, to give you a historical parallel, was that the law taught something. Up until the introduction of no-fault divorce, when you would sue to get out of a marriage, to have a divorce, you would cite fault. And the three historical conditions, there were 3 A's: abuse, abandonment, and adultery. You would say, my spouse is abusing me, my spouse abandoned me, my spouse has committed adultery. These were serious reasons to end a marriage. The presumption, the assumption was that marriage was a permanent relationship. As a result, prior to the introduction of no-fault divorce, we had divorce rates that were in single digits. After the introduction of no-fault divorce, divorce rates reached almost 50%. The law now taught something. The law taught that marriage need not be permanent, that marriage can be a temporary relationship. And the consequences of this were horrendous, especially for children. Divorce does not serve the interests of children. So redefining marriage in this direction is similar to no-fault divorce in that it makes it more about the desires of adults than the needs of children. It makes it more about the romantic life of consenting adults than the family life that best serves this reproductive purpose. So that's the first, is that redefining marriage takes it away from a family-centric, child-centric relationship into an adult-centric one, and that it makes mothers and fathers, men and women, interchangeable. The second is that there's no reason why the redefinition of marriage would stop here. This came out during oral arguments when an Obama appointee, Justice Sotomayor, asked the attorney in favor of same-sex marriage. He said, if justice and equality demand that we redefine marriage to include the same-sex couple, why doesn't justice and equality demand that we redefine marriage to include the throuple? A throuple, I discovered when I was doing research for the book that I co-authored on this topic, is a 3-person couple. We came across this term in New York Magazine, and they were doing a profile on a throuple that lives in Brooklyn. And the idea here is that they're just like a couple, except there are 3 of them. And they share an apartment, and they share this dog, and they cook breakfast and dinner for each other, and all the rest, except they're 3 people. And the attorney, when Sotomayor asked him this, didn't have a persuasive response at all. He started talking about tradition and history. But if you want to talk about tradition and history, you're going to find a much stronger tradition and history for the male-female aspect to marriage. So the question is, once you say that the male-female aspect of marriage is irrational and arbitrary, what's so magical about the number 2? Because the way that we arrived at monogamy in Western law, the way that we got monogamy into American marriage law, was that it was one man and one woman. Because only one man and one woman can unite in the type of act that produces new life. Every new life has exactly one mother and one father as a biological matter, and marriage is the relationship that unifies those people and those relationships. But once you sever the connection for marriage from the male-female part, what's left about the number 2? Why are 2 sums magical in a way that 3 sums or 4 sums or 5 sums aren't? The same question can then be asked about permanency, which we've already seen with no-fault divorce, but also with sexual exclusivity. Historically, marriage has also been a sexually exclusive relationship. You only slept with your spouse. You cheated on your spouse if you slept with someone other than your spouse. If marriage is mainly about the romantic lives of consenting adults and it has nothing to do with children or childbearing, why shouldn't you sleep with someone other than your spouse, provided your spouse consents? So several of the articles that have been published in the wake of the Supreme Court decision have said this is something that straight people can learn from gay relationships, the virtues of extramarital affairs, provided there's no coercion and there's no deceit. But you can ask yourself this question. Whatever the morality of multi-personal unions, multi-person relationships, sexually open